Hey Rob, how you doing? I am from Mississippi. Say what? Can't hear me?
How about now? Can you guys? No, they can hear you. Can you hear me, guys? Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. All right. Sounds like you got me, right? All right, we good? All right. So, all right. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Why not, right? Hey,
Right.
good morning, Mark. So, I met Justin at Reefapalooza, Orlando, and I got to know him a little bit behind the scenes. I thought his approach and passion about reefing was pretty cool. And then I saw his tank, and then there left little doubt in my mind that he was walking the walk, or walking the talk rather. Just to reiterate, if you're new to the show, Average Joe's Reef is about storytelling, collaboration, positivity, and learning. We're not the experts. It's a two-way street. We like to keep it fun and constructive. And again, it's not about average tanks. It's about tanks across the spectrum and wherever you're at in your journey. But we just want to jam about reef tanks. So with that, this is Justin. And Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I am from Mississippi. I've had a reef tank for, I don't know, 7 years now. Actually, these little clownfish right here came from my first tank. So they're about 7 years as well. But I started out in freshwater, had all the planted tanks, and then just kind of made my way into a little small saltwater tank. Started out with a 10-gallon, learned a lot of hard lessons with that small volume of water.
How long ago was that? How far back did this start?
So this tank's been running for a little over 3 years, and the other tank ran for I had to change tanks 3 times in that little 10-gallon. So the last version of the tank, that 10-gallon, ran for about 2 years, but each tank before that ran about a year. So 4 years in a 10-gallon, trying to do a mostly SPS with a lot of zoanthids, but it was a big learning curve trying to keep everything balanced. Like this PC Rainbow Acro came out of that 10-gallon, and it was sucking up some calcium and alkalinity daily.
Well, I can see, but I mean, for a 3-year tank, that's not a young tank, but it's not a really old tank either. And when we get into your content, we'll roll some of your video along. You've had some amazing continuous growth. So things must have been stable for a very long time. I've hit some hiccups myself, with tanks, mostly myself screwing my tank up. But then, when you get those hiccups, it takes a while for that steady growth to come back. And
100%. Excellent. Unfortunately, I am I wind up having things get angry with me as well. I've got a Ghani that's been mad for like a month now. It's finally starting to have some polyp extension again. And my acro colony right here, this little tenuous, I don't think it's going to make it. It's been polypless for, I have to say though, it's been polypless for almost a month now, and it's still not dead. So maybe, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we can talk about that. I think that's a great topic where, we'll call it an event, right? Whether it's induced by us, whether it's mysterious, I don't know, or maybe it's just happenstance, and what those look like. You've touched on a few points that I've experienced with the Ghanis. I had a Ghani withdraw into a little ball, didn't come out any extension for a solid month. I thought it was going to be dead for sure. And now it's just crazy growing. So it's kind of interesting, like, and it's hard to put your finger on it, right? Like, did it happen yesterday? Or did it happen last month? Or a week?
I mean, it was long and flowy, and then nothing. I mean, it just shrank down to no polyps. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave it alone. We'll see what happens. And
Yeah. Peter said
it's
he's
starting
had
to.
something. Peter said he's got something like that too. A Millie that's recovering from a slow tissue necrosis.
Those are my favorite. I have a little tenuous that died down to like 2 polyps, and it is a small. It's a little bigger than a regular frag now. It's taken like a year and a half, but it's slightly bigger
Okay.
than a frag.
Right. I'm gonna switch over here, and so I thought, before we show your tank, lights are always to me an interesting topic, right? So people get pretty jacked up about lights, and we get a lot of interesting discussions and sometimes arguments about, hey, this is the light to grow a tank with. That's the light, Then there's
Right.
the breadth and width of how much do you want to spend on your lights, budgets and.
Oh,
So talk to me a little bit about. I've heard of the Reef breeders. I'm not familiar with them at all. And then it looks like you have some AliExpress bars on there.
actually, those are from SB Reef,
SB Reef.
out of
Okay.
Pensacola. Yeah. I had one of their lights on my 10-gallon for a long time before I switched over to a Radion, and I had no complaints with it. I only switched to a Radion because I wanted a Radion. So when I went to buy bars at the time, I didn't know about the AliExpress because I bought these when I started this tank like 3.5 years ago. But the AliExpress bars, I didn't know anything about them, so I bought these. They were the cheapest, and I knew the spectrum. I liked the spectrum that came out of them.
Okay.
But the Reef breeders have been on here for about a year now, and
Okay.
I'm impressed with them. I should have sent you the what I was getting in par on all these corals. I have a picture saved, but I didn't think about it until just now. But man,
Anthony remarks he's using Reef breeders as well.
Like this big colony right here is getting like 580, 600, and
Okay.
These A-cans, if it wasn't for the shelf of this colony right here, they'd be getting 250 on the sand.
That's
like everything on my sands. Yeah, everything in my tank is 250 and up, except for things that are under shelves.
Did you have to acclimate, like, when you put in like lower light corals, like those A-cans? I don't think they're really highlight corals. How do you introduce them when you got the power that you do in the tank?
Well, all this stuff started under a T5, and I was about 100 par less with the T5. I had an 8-bulb T5, and I had it raised up pretty high, and it was I got about 100 par less out of that T5 fixture. And by the time I switched over to this, they were all kind of covered by acro colonies hanging out over the top of them, and so they don't get the full blast of this new light. And so I took about a month bringing it up from 100 par, what they were used to, up to where I wanted it at.
Mm-hmm.
And they never really cared.
That's very cool.
The weak spots in the lighting are on the very ends, and I think it's because I run the gyro pumps. I think they block some of the light, but like my Duncan over here and the Ghanies, they sit 150, 175.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of a trick I've used too. And while I'm not blasting my tank with the power you are, it has a potential to get up there. So like I'm working it up there, trying to acclimate my bars in right now. But I do like what you mentioned. I've got like an acanthophilia that I'm hiding underneath my MP60, right, and blocking some of that par there. So that definitely helps. So you can find the edges of your tank or hide them under a pump, or like you said, if you go acros crazy like you do, you have a shelf to hide something under.
I've got a soft spot for Ghanies and A-cans, and I will always have at least a few little A-cans, or micro Musa and Ghanies. And now I've started liking torches. I got a couple of torches there in the middle of the tank, and
I see that, and I don't think you need any more than a couple because those look pretty large. So how many heads is that? Is that a dragon soul on the right? I don't know.
It is a cherry corals 21 tails, but yeah, it's a type of dragon soul. So, but it is probably, if I had to say, probably 30 heads. I really need to frag it. Like,
how long
really
have you had? How many heads did it have when you got it?
I got it from a buddy of mine, reasonably local. He lives in Memphis, so it's about an hour and a half away. But it had it had 1.5. Like the heads were splitting. Like it was a single head that was like splitting into two. And I've had it probably a little year and a half.
That's crazy growth on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk after the show because my tank growth has just always been just kind of slow and steady. Like it never got this gangbusters type of growth, and I'm stumped, but I'll figure it out one of these.
And it's one of those things like, so I don't know if you can tell, but for some reason this side of my tank, it's all little, I say mini colonies because they're not just enormous, but they are little colonies, but this side. Yeah. Like that one's barely bigger than the frag it came in. It just encrusted and didn't really suck. I don't know why, but this side doesn't grow like this side does. It baffles me. I get great growth over here and have to, bonsai all this to keep it from growing into each other. But that side is just like, leave it alone.
Interesting. Maybe it's a flow thing. Anthony was wondering what size your tank is.
It's a standard 90. It's like a Marine Land 90. I got it for free from somebody. They were getting rid of a 90-gallon tank. I wasn't even planning on upgrading tanks. I was still in the 10-gallon. He was like, "Hey, man, you want this 90-gallon tank?" My mom had 2 clownfish in it, and so they tore it down.
Did you have to drill the tank yourself, or was it already drilled?
Yeah, I had to drill it. It was like a 10-year-old tank, so I stripped all the silicone and resealed it and everything. I wouldn't.
Okay. So definitely a budgeteer approach, on the startup there that you're.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I built the stand. It's all 2x4 stand and canopy. And I did it all a little bit at a time so that I didn't have to throw a bunch of money into it all at once. I probably had all this stuff like lumber and built the stand and all that probably 2 years before I ever actually put water in the thing. I was just buying pumps and here and there.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So, what prompted the change in the lights? What made you go to the reef readers?
So it was kind of I got sick of changing bulbs, and I had to run fans. This tank's on an exterior wall, and here in Mississippi, it's been like 100 degrees every day since like the last week of May, and so. With those T5s, this thing would go from like 78 to 81 with 2 PC fans running all day long.
Oh wow!
Even with my air conditioner set to like anywhere between 70 to 75, it would still just keep creeping up because those T5s got so hot. And
what is your nominal tank temperature that you shoot for?
Well, I just had a heater go out. Fortunately, I had a backup, so now it's running between 78 and 79.
Okay.
But I had one of those little Finex. It's a titanium heater with the little controller built in line, and I've had it for like a year and a half, 2 years, and it just stopped heating. I have it back. I have my Apex running as a backup on that. Like I let the little controller do all the work, and then my Apex just shut it down if it got outside of. And then I had just one of the BRS titanium heaters plugged into an outlet on the Apex. If it got too cold, it would kick that on as a backup.
Yeah. I have BRS titanium heaters. They're directly controlled by the Apex as well. I've had one go out too. It just stopped heating.
Yeah, but now it's the only one running the tank, so I have it. So it doesn't burn my outlet out. I extended the range from 78 to 79 so that it would stay on longer and off longer, so that it would cycle fewer times a day. But now it never gets outside of those ranges. It has one time, and it's because my air conditioner wasn't working right. I was at work. I saw my temperature keep climbing and got an alert.
Yeah, we shut our AC off at one point this summer, and even though the temperature inside was acceptable, I definitely noticed my tank climb up without it running. So wherever you live in the summertime, it's important.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about your approach to reefing at this current point in time. Like what do you got going on under the stand here? Walk us through some of the things that you've got in place. What's working for you, what your thought process is on that.
Right. It's a bit of a rat's nest under there, but I run a Reef Octopus, the 150 Regal.
Okay. What's your experience been with that? How's that been working for you?
I have to say it's been one of the best running skimmers I've used thus far. Like I have zero complaints. If you can tell from that unclean cup in the background. The CO2 scrubbers, I mean, it's black. I mean, it
Right.
is a thick layer, even on the inside of the cup, not the neck. Like it's just a layer of stuff in the cup. It works fantastically. I oversized because I've got a lot of fish in my tank and probably a little too much for a 90. But I have one of those Avast plank feeders, and I have it feeding hourly for like 15 seconds. It kicks on and feeds and then
Okay.
kicks off. I had
So
some
heavy
Antheus
in,
in
heavy
here.
out.
Yeah, 100%. I had some Antheus in here, and I wanted to have them constant food. They all wound up dying, but my 5 chromis are still alive and haven't killed each other in 2 years. So I think that might be part of it. They don't have to fight for food.
That's impressive.
So,
I've heard like a lot of debates and stories about, people, because I like chromis. I mean, they're simple fish, but you get a bunch of them and they just pick each other off.
and I will say I have personal experience on this. My Avast has been off for a week because it broke and I had to send it back to him. He's fixing it.
Okay.
No questions asked. He said it was still under warranty. He's fixing it, send it back to me. It's shit now. It should be here. But since that feeder's been off the tank, I've got one chromis who's the smallest one, and he will not swim with the other ones. He hides all day long, won't come out for anything. And I think it's for food dominance. So I kind of
Okay.
wonder if feeding more often, more regularly,
Right.
might limit some of that aggression.
Right. Anthony's asking, are you a regular water change guy? Like, what's your thought process on water changes these days?
I have my wife's cube has like no skimmer, no nothing. So that one gets changed. I make like 40 gallons I got a 40-gallon brute trash can. I make like 40 gallons a month, and hers gets like 2 water changes a month that are it's like a 20-gallon cube. So hers gets like 20 a month. So I'll do a full water change every month, split it up over 2 or, 50% every other week. But my tank, I probably get 20 to 30 a month in. When I think about it, sometimes it might go 6 weeks, it might go 8, but I'm dosing. If you can tell, on the end of under the little gate valve, I've got a little Kamoer pump there. I've got 2 of them. One of them's dosing Brightwell Coral Amino, and the other is dosing Nopox. So I run a skimmer dose Nopox, and then I also run that turf scrubber, which is new. So I'm hoping that will do away with the Nopox when it gets really established. Fingers crossed, but we'll see.
So walk us through the Nopox a little bit. Like, what are your current parameters as far as nitrate and phosphates? I mean, what are you shooting for, and how are you using the Nopox? I assume that's what you're using the Nopox to do, right?
Yeah. So for about a year, I battled with really high nitrate, and it got up to about 45, 50 for a while. And but I got it back down. I shoot for sub 10 nitrate, and anything under 0.1 on phosphate. And if it gets over 0.1, I might do something about it, but typically I just let it correct itself. But the right now my nitrate runs around 15-ish, because I tried to cut back the Nopox when I started getting algae growth on the scrubber, and I don't think it was enough. And so now I've bumped it back up to where it was, and it's starting to drop. My nitrate's starting to drop. It got up to 15. I think when I tested last week, it was at 11. So hopefully this week, when I test tomorrow, it'll be under 10, and maybe I'll try to dial the Nopox back again. The problem now, though, is that scrubber's soaking up all my phosphate. So I'm having to dose phosphate, and I had to turn the lights down a little bit, because Nopox doesn't work if you don't have phosphate in the tank. So I'm having to like dose back a little bit of phosphate.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of a mad.
So I shortened
thing trying to
right. I shortened my lighting cycle on that last week, and I've been running 4 hours less a day, and I dosed a little bit of phosphate, and we'll see what it is this week. Hopefully I found a happy medium.
How much daily dosage on the Nopox is it taking on that 90 gallon to keep things there?
Right now it's about 18 milliliters.
Okay.
And I think it's because I feed so heavy. According to the back of the bottle, I'm only supposed to be doing like 8 or 9. I'm having to do double that. But
yeah, I've had some nitrates creeping up on me here, and I mean, I'm only running at 25, but I did just recently purchase a bottle of Nopox, and I haven't used it yet, but I was definitely trying to drill in there because, these are issues that everybody deals with, right? You want to hit stuff into a
Right.
range, and you can go after it with scrubbers, you can go after it with skimmers, you can go after it with roller filters. There's just all kinds of ways to do it, right? And sometimes even when you
Right.
have all that stuff, you're still, left wondering, well, how am I going to get it down further, right? So
Right.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. But my approach has been, there you go. You can see the how nasty that cup is. I clean it every week at least. For reference, I probably sent you those pics on Saturday before I cleaned it on
Right.
Sunday. That's 7 days worth of gunk.
And this is the newer version of the clear water scrubbers, right?
That's the brand new one. I have the CW50, the V2. And
how long have you been using it?
I think it may be a month now, but I've got a decent little thick mat of algae. There's still a few bare spots, but I've had to actually scrape it off with a credit card once now.
Okay. All right. So pretty good. Happy with it so far? For your setup, it's doing what you hope to? Yep.
The first 10 days, I got impressive growth within 10 days of installing it. And then I got some sort of like weird brown slime that grew all over the other algae, and it just kind of sloughed off. And so I just cleaned it off real good and let it restart. And now it's nothing but hair algae.
Right. I mean, you're just running water over a medium, and you got some lights. How many micromoles per minute are you hitting it with? I mean, then it's just going to be water chemistry or whatever's going on in your tank. I mean,
right.
I mean, there's nothing magical going on there other than the form, fit, and function to the space you got it in. But it's pretty cool. I like it.
It's very food heavy in my tank, so it should grow algae just fine.
So on your carbonate alkalinity, so clearly you've got an SPS dominant tank, right? And talk to us a little bit about what it takes to maintain the alkalinity and the calcium in your tank and how you're doing that.
So what you're looking at there is my I have a calc stirrer because, as you could tell, I don't really have much room under my stand anymore. So having a calc container isn't really ideal. So I primarily I max my calc out daily with my evaporation. Like my ATO doesn't ever kick on. So that's a good chunk of my dosing. And then I also run the BRS Tropic Mirror hybrid thing where you dose the A and K trace elements to their 2-part, and then I do part C as well, the Tropic Mirror part C, to kind of keep all the levels balanced. I do about 100 mils of each part daily on top of all that calc, and then so that would be 200-ish of part C. Okay.
Yeah, because you're probably the alkalinity demands are probably exceeding your evaporation limits with the normal saturation that you're running.
By far. I mean, if I turn my dosing pumps off with the 2-part, I would drop probably 2 DKH a day.
Yeah, do you even have with calc running? What is your overall DKH consumption on that tank a day?
I think it's like 4.5.
That's a lot.
Yeah, like if everything went off, everything would probably, I don't know. I feel like they're a little more forgiving than I give them credit for, but because I have had some DKH drops. But
Sammy31 is asking if you could elaborate more on how you dose the Tropic Mirror. He just bought some, and it's a little confusing.
So,
and I agree with that. If you read the directions on there, they're a little cryptic,
So if you're doing the same thing as me, all right. So I assume you're talking about part C. I'm not really sure.
If you could clarify, that would help.
I do the minimum on the trace elements because I thought since I had 4 DKH consumption that my trace elements were going to be maxed out, and so I did their maximum dose. Okay.
The trace.
The trace. I would do the minimum. Whatever BRS said was the minimum. It was like 88, I think, because this tank consuming 4 DKH a day is not doing, like, I overdose copper and all these different trace elements that are in that mix because I was doing the max thinking that was what it needed. And then I did a ICP and everything was high. And I was like, let me turn it back. So now I do the absolute minimum dose, and it's kept them on the charts. They're not at 0. They may not be ideal, but they're not lacking.
How often do you ICP? Is there a regular schedule or kind of like, when I think about it, I mean,
I've got an alert in my Apex set to turn on, or set to remind me to buy ICP every 3 months.
Mhm.
But I bought it about a month and a half ago, and it's been sitting on my my TV stand right here for probably a month now. And I just filled up the water sample yesterday. I got to drop it in the post office box.
Yeah, I'm overdue on one myself. I've hit my 6 month. I'm past my 6 month slurry mark, and I need to send that in to make sure everything's cool. But yeah, I hear you. I don't have a regular schedule either. Any preference on ICP tests that you've really just stuck with for whatever reason? I mean, there's a whole bunch of them out there.
I used Triton forever because it was Triton and that was what everybody knew. But then I started using the ATI one because it tests your RO as well. And that's, to me, that's nice. I can know, if something's high in my tank, like one time I had a little elevated copper, didn't know where it was coming from, but it came out of the RO. I was getting copper through my RO unit. So I changed all my filters and
boom,
solved my problem.
Excellent. Yeah, it's always nice to be able to measure things and see where they are. So here we've got the top of your tank with the hood open, and that must be your advanced plank feeder there, and then you got a couple fans, it looks like, to keep temperatures down.
Yep. I got 2 pieces. So I don't have to do this. The PC fans are never necessary, but my tank evaporates around probably a gallon a day. But for me to be able to, so typically I do calc, I dose it overnight. So I do the entire evaporation while the lights are off worth of calc. So typically it's about 5 mils a minute on a constant or continuous doser. And I wanted to get that up to 6 for getting the pH up a little higher and getting a little more dose out of it. So I put PC fans on to run while the lights are on. Like, it's not for heat. It's just to make it evaporate a little bit more so that I can dose a little more calc.
Whatever you got. With you being so high up there on the consumption for the alkalinity and whatnot, have you considered some of those other methods out there, like either you could do a calcium reactor, right, or a carbonic acid generator, or then there's the slurry kick. Some of us idiots are doing slurry out there.
Look, if I had room, I would 100% be on slurry. 100%. Wouldn't even think about it. But I don't have room for that, so I've got to deal with what I got. Next tank, that's probably going to be a thing that it winds up being. I'll probably start off with a regular calc drip, and when I outgrow that, I'll turn into a slurry.
Trying to keep everything underneath contained within the area you've got under the stand, and you don't want that creeping out into the living space, right?
I can tell you that I have had better results keeping my pH from 8.2 to 8.4 than I did before I worried about it and just let it ride from 7.8 to 8. And I've had less mortality and better growth, better colors. And so I'm not particularly chasing pH, chasing a number, but I'm trying to keep it in a reasonable range and as high as I can get it. And that's why I'm not a fan of calcium reactors, because if I took my CO2 scrubber off and stopped dosing calc and just did a calcium reactor, my pH would probably be like 7.8, maybe 7.9.
Yeah, I don't know that I like to call it chasing pH more than, like kicking it in the pants and making sure it doesn't go below, because, the first year I struggled with my pH, and it was sitting there, lows of 7.8, 7.7, and on a good day I'd get to 8, right? And things were just, they just didn't look great. I mean, they were there, but
right.
And after I put quite a bit of focus on it and just made sure that it didn't drop below 8.2, night and day difference, not only on the growth, but just like you said, coloration, less mortality. Things seem to be a little bit more tolerant, if you want to call it, for lack of a better word, of things happening than when that pH was lower. So I seen that you, to keep that pH up there, it looked like you were doing a little bit of scrubbing.
I do. I run I think it's the ice cap one, the CO2 scrubber. It's the ice cap. It's the ice cap one. I had the BRS one for a while, but my problem was the media kept getting wet. Because I run it recirculating. I got Fisher Hex has a website. He's a YouTuber, and he makes these little 3D printed rings custom fit for different protein skimmer cups. And so it's got a little nozzle on the side of it so I can suck the air out of the cup back into the, and
Okay.
it definitely prolongs the media. Like I can go, instead of 2 weeks on a full thing of media, it'll go a month to 6 weeks for me. I can't say that it'll work that great for everybody, but
like a it's basically a recirculation, right?
yeah. And and I don't worry about, people are like, oh, don't recirculate because you're getting stale air. That's not stale air. You're recirculating oxygen. For instance, if you have surgery, they use that exact same stuff and you breathe through that when you're having surgery. If you're on the vent in surgery,
right,
that's the stuff in the canister that your breath goes through that. You rebreathe back in oxygen that's made out of that. And so if it's good enough for a person, I feel like it's definitely supplying enough fresh air for the tank.
Where do you picking up your media these days? And it's essentially just pelletized calcium hydroxide, right? I mean,
it is. I actually buy veterinary grade.
Okay.
Because I've found a 5-gallon container. Like it's a big square. It's probably 2 foot tall by a foot and a half wide container of the stuff on eBay for like $100.
Yeah,
and that will last me over a year.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. I'm scrubbing as well. I'm using those bigger BRS Big Blue containers, really big.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I load those up and I can get a month out of them. But
I think for this one refill of the CO2 container, I save about $1.50, $2 per refill buying the one I bought, because I'm buying in like bulk.
Yeah, it's expensive if you go through places like BRS and other
saltwater
aquarium outlet type places. They get a premium for that small packaged amount.
Yeah, and I get that. You're paying more for packaging, you're paying more for, but I don't want to pay for that packaging. I'd rather just buy it all at once and then not worry about it for a year. And
I got quotes on a heat exchanger, which would probably solve that problem for me as well. But, it was like $4,000, and I was doing some math and I was like, well, how much, rebreather, calcium scrubber stuff can I buy, before I hit that number? And I was like, I could go a few years. So I was like, I'm scrubbing.
And interestingly enough, when I swapped over to the skimmer, probably, I don't know, I probably had it a year now, maybe. I don't even know if it's been that long. I bought it before Reefapalooza. I had it about a month before Reefapalooza. And the air draw on this giant monster of a skimmer was so much better than my old one that it alone does a majority of my pH boosting. Like, it's incredible. Like, it did a fantastic job of boosting my pH. Like, and I did an experiment on, because it's got a DC pump. And so I did an experiment on seeing whether the pump speed at different levels would affect the pH of my tank. And it did. Like, it really did. So I run the quick cat shoe. But
Sammy's asking real quick, circle back on how the Part C Tropic Marin is used. Is it in a separate doser, or are you mixing it in with something?
It is. So Part C is supposed to be double. So whatever you dose of alkalinity, whatever you dose of calcium, you add those together, and that's how much you dose of Part C. So if you're dosing, we'll do easy math. If you're dosing 100 milliliters of alk, 100 milliliters of calcium, you would dose 200 milliliters of Part C. And so I was doing that on one of those little, the Kamoer little Wi-Fi pumps.
Okay. Yep.
And the Part C was on that, and the alk and calcium were on my Neptune dose, which is I had running controlled dosing with the Trident. I love it. Fantastic feature. I've had no issues with it. And you set the amount that it can dose maximum, and you can set it to where it can't dose more than a certain amount, so that you can't like super overdose your tank without an absolute pump failure, Okay. But I had it set up that way, and I hated having to because it would bump it up slightly every day. Like if I had a little more consumption today, it would bump up my alk and calcium dose, or alk and not calcium. And so I was having to do math, and I'd have to dose a little more today, or oops, I dosed too much part C today. Now tomorrow I don't need to dose as much. And so I was having to mess with it too much. So I bought a second dose and put on each head, I put part C. And then I set the exact same settings on the out pump as the out part C, and then calcium as calcium part C. So now when the Trident changes alkalinity, it's changing the part C for alkalinity, and so they both change independently, and they will dose the exact same amount on each head.
Okay. I was just about to ask if to clarify, how are you measuring your calcium alkalinity, and you're using the Trident?
Yes, but I also, so I have a lack of trust in anything automated. I mean, I trust it to an extent, but I also double check things. So once or twice a month, I'll check it with, I've got a Red Sea calcium kit, and I've also got one of the HANA checkers for calcium. I don't use it that much. Yes. I trust it to a reasonable extent, but if I get some kind of wonky reading, I'm not going to be like, oh, I need to dose a bunch of stuff. I'm going to test it and make sure that it's not wrong, because I've had that happen recently. Actually, my Trident failed on me. The tube to drain the waste got pinched, and it caused the B reagent line to get blown off the little manifold because of the pressure buildup. And so it was causing my calcium readings to drop and my magnesium to start climbing. And I recalibrated it, didn't think anything of it. And then one day it started shorting my whole system out because it was leaking inside and it was shorting out. So I had to get a whole new Trident. Fortunately,
Go ahead.
What's that?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Fortunately, Neptune did, like, they let me use their program, the service program. So I did like the Trident switch out. So I only had to pay like $199 to get a new one. So I didn't have to buy a whole new one, but that was on me. I pinched I got the line pinched, didn't keep it clear.
It was outside of warranty then?
Oh yeah, mine's okay. I've already done the DIY service on it back this past November. So I'm almost 3 years owning. Trident.
Well, that's really not too bad. I mean, to get you a discount like that, because what is that unit normally, like $600 maybe?
Yeah, it's like $600, I think. Yeah, I think it's $599. It may be more than that now. Everything's going up, but
I mean, 66% discount is a heck of a discount.
Yeah, and it was something that I did. I mean, it wasn't their fault. It was me. I set something on top of it and pinched off the waistline, and it ruined itself. So, and they didn't care. So I have to say that for their customer service, they at least took care of me.
Yeah. How often are you testing alkalinity a day? Are you going through a lot of reagent?
Yes, I use the ABC reagents in it.
How are you finding
that? Because they work just as good, and they're cheaper, and I can buy the alkalinity reagent separately without having to buy the full kit. And I test alkalinity. So I set up a custom schedule, and outside of their little scheduling, and I test calcium and magnesium once a day because it really doesn't change that much. But I test alkalinity. I was running 8 times a day for a little while, but I've cut it back to 4.
Okay.
But yeah, I go through a decent amount of alkalinity reagent. My calcium and magnesium, they last me a while.
Yeah, I think I'm testing 3. I was thinking about maybe moving to 4 times a day, but I mean, I've been on 3 for so long, but I haven't changed much in my system, so it's.
So when I tested more often using controlled dosing, I had a little more problems with it swinging. Not drastically, like 0.2 a day, or from one test to the next, it might be 0.2 off. But I've found that when I run it in 4 alk tests and then set the dose for alkalinity for that 6 hours. So if I'm dosing 100 milliliters a day, my tank might use 20 milliliters from noon or 6 a.m. to noon, and it might use 40 from noon to 6 p.m. and then like 30 from 6 p.m. to midnight. And so I set them up in those increments and then let the trident adjust each individual 6-hour period. And I've had the most steady results doing it that way with the automated
where do you
dosing.
start to, what's your thought process on parameter swings? You know, based off of your experience, your opinion, I mean, where do you get nervous? Do you have a goal do you shoot for? You know, because I know that there's some people out there that are, you know, they're we'll call it, you know, they're focused on pH, right? So they dose on pH, and then they let their alkalinity go all over the place. Right? What do you?
I don't think it's as serious as a lot of people make it. Don't get me wrong, I don't do it all the time.
Mhm.
But the biggest issue I feel like when people have swings, like alkalinity swings. So for instance, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, I had a calc issue. So there's a little hole on the inside of the stirrer that vents so that it won't create a siphon. Well, I had poured calc powder over that hole and didn't realize it, and it's plugged up and created a siphon. So every time it would get filled up, it would dump just a ton, like all at once. And so it got over the course of like 24 hours, it got my alkalinity from the 9 that I keep it at up to like 10.5. And my pH went up to like, and I was wondering why my pH kept rising. It didn't rise enough, but it would shoot up in spikes. Like it would go from like 8.3 to 8.4, and then it'd start creeping back down, and then it'd go from like 8.35 to 8.45. And I was like, what's going on? And so I got home, and that evening my test was like 10. And so I feel like with those spikes and swings, most of your issues come from overcorrection. I didn't do anything. I turned off my dosers, turned off my calc stirrer, and just let the tank eat it. And it took about 2 days to like where it would kind of balance itself again. Like it took like 4 hours to get from 10.5 back down to 9, but nothing was really angry. Nothing was. And on the other end of the spectrum, I've run out of 2-part. Didn't realize it. And before I started making these little DIY, you know, the DDR that Apex has.
Yeah.
It tells you how much fluid's left in the container.
Right.
On Reef to Reef, or one of those, I found somebody that did. They found those little plug connectors. It's like that fits that connector, and they basically just put a little wire from one pin to another that gave it the resistance to tell it that a DDR was plugged in. And so now I get the tile in my Apex to tell me.
Oh, yeah.
So now I can see how much is left in my container without having a DDR. But before that, I ran out of alkalinity, and before I got home in the afternoon, I was down to like 5.5. I just slowly brought it up over a week, and nothing cared.
Yeah,
I think the problem people have a lot of the times, unless it's just like crazy, like if you go from 9 to 20 DKH, you're probably going to kill everything. But
it's
you know, if you're within
in your tank like Christmas.
Yeah, if you're within like 2 DKH with alkalinity, I don't think you're gonna. If you don't do anything wild, don't get me wrong, you may have problems, but I don't think you're gonna have massive problems unless you freak out, do a 70% water change, and throw off something else that was not unstable. Like your salinity or your temperature, or I think a lot of times our knee jerks are what gets us. It's best to let things
100%.
happen slowly. The problem may happen fast, but that doesn't mean you need to fix it fast.
Right. I've definitely overcompensated several times.
In a lot of situations. Sometimes fast fix is needed. If you drop like me, I had one of those Eheim feeders for a while, and I dropped it in the tank full with the batteries, and the batteries exploded. That required a fast fix, but usually they don't.
I had an alkalinity incident similar. I don't know if it was similar, but just call it an alkalinity incident when I was traveling out east, and I think it was 3 days before I got home. So I'm dosing slurry, And I've been dosing well over 6 months now for sure. And I'm using this manifold that I developed, and it's apparently started having some buildup issues because it got clogged up and it blew the tubing off from the doser, right?
Ooh,
It just
yeah.
sprayed slurry everywhere, right? But the long story
Ah,
is I wasn't due home for like 3 days, right? And I'm watching my alkalinity on my Apex just plummet daily, and I'm like, there's nothing I can do because I'm not going to try to get my girlfriend to figure out how to hand dose anything, and we'll
right,
try to fix this thing. Thank God I designed it well with a Venturi because it should have been hosing water everywhere, but the pump kept
right,
running and it wasn't squirting water. It was sitting open. But by the time I got home, I normally run 9.5 somewhere around there, and it was 6 by the time I
yeah,
got home. And I know I didn't overcompensate. I just cleaned the line, put it back together, and just started dosing like I normally do. Or I didn't try to catch it up and get right back there. I just like, well, you're gonna get there when you get there. And
and
it took a
I
while,
don't,
but now I had a few corals like
I
my bubblegum digi is still pissed off. I mean,
right,
90% of my other corals are fine. My rainbow gonopora is mad, and my bubblegum digi is mad. And it took, I think, I don't know, maybe a week for that to show up, right? Like they're not
right,
toast, but they're not happy. So we'll see.
right. Yeah, and in my opinion, if I was going to have one, I'd rather it be a low alkalinity DKH. I'd rather it get down to 5 than 12
Yeah, I agree for
because
sure.
at least the corals did that and then had the time to adjust. Whereas usually, if you're like a 12 situation, it probably happens immediately,
Instantaneously. Yeah.
and so it's a gradual, natural decrease versus a giant jump.
Right, right. The decrease coming from their natural consumption rather than dumping,
Right.
an overdose
Obscene
situation,
amounts of right.
which I've tried to do in the name of science to see what it would do to things, right? Accidentally,
Right.
definitely overdosed. I've overdosed calc before. I mean, basically, if we dose anything at some certain point in time, doesn't matter what you're dosing, something's gonna get overdosed. I mean, it's just gonna happen. Just like you said, it's how you deal with it and how you recover from it can be as every bit as important as what happened itself, right?
Right.
So going on here, and then here we've got a nice couple shots of your tank with, and I've got the video speeded up here a little bit, so this isn't actually representative of your normal flow, but I just
I mean,
popped the video feed up a little bit, but it's not that far off.
it's actually lower than it has been. I took my MP40s offline. I'm kind of just seeing how the gyres doing their own. Um, I'm not mad about it. I may just leave it with the 2 gyres. I pumped them up a little higher, and I think I like the flow pattern a little better.
So you're using for the internal flow, you got the gyres. Whose gyres are you using?
Those are the ice cap ones. Again, it was a budgeteer purchase. I bought them 3.5 years ago with the tank. I bought one at a time, and then they're the ice cap 3Ks, and I had my first issue with one here recently. This one right here, the motor block just seized up, wouldn't
Okay.
spin anymore, and I think that's from me. I had to replace a bunch of bearings, and I had to replace 2 MP40 heads while I was running that sodium hydroxide test for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking to you about that when we were at RAP.
Yeah.
I'm 90% positive that sodium hydroxide ruined 2 MP40 heads and my gyre bearings, and it also made my relatively new skimmer pump lock up. I had to do a cleaning on that skimmer pump in about 6 weeks after purchase because it was not wanting to run right. And
I mean,
so
calcium hydroxide is nasty enough, and I try to tend to stay away from the sodiums. And there's a couple other ones that people are using out there. I mean, they have a lot of punch, and it doesn't take very much to get far with it. But
and
dang,
that's the
I
thing.
mean,
I was having to dose a lot of it. Like I was cutting out calc and strictly running. And you remember I was running calcium hydroxide sodium hydroxide and soda ash to like peg my pH at like 8.35. Like I had one pump, and then I would have it switch over when the pH would pass, 8.35, and so like peg it right there. And man, it did a number on those pumps. It wasn't worth it. I took it off.
Yeah, those are far less forgiving, So an overdose of those is going to be far more catastrophic than an equivalent overdose of like talc washer or something like that. So I mean, not saying don't use them, but know what you're getting into for sure. And there's positives.
Me personally, if somebody asked me if they should use it, I would tell them no, don't do it.
Yeah,
my experience is I was down $200 in MP40 heads and another 60 on a block for my gyre that I had to buy from Coral View, and I don't know.
I've been curious about the gyres, about using them for flow along the back wall, like mounting them vertical or whatever.
Sideways?
I keep hearing everybody says they're like maintenance nightmares. Not been your experience, like just the one issue you had with this, maybe it was precipitated literally by sodium hydroxide.
Yeah, they require more frequent cleaning. They're not a leave it alone, I'll do it every 6 months pump. You will 100% lose flow. 6 weeks is as long as mine goes, 6 to 8 weeks. I don't let them go any farther than that. I'm citric acid bat. But as far as cleaning, I take them out, throw them in a bucket, let them run in the bucket of citric acid. And then when it gets done, I pull the little screen guards off and just brush everything off with a toothbrush and then put it back together. So, I mean, it's no more than I do on my gyre or my MP40s that I ran. I just throw them in a bucket of citric acid and then pull them out, brush them, take them apart, check the magnets, brush them, toothbrush off. But the problem was you have to do it more frequently, or it's a significant reduction in flow after about 8 weeks. Like it starts dropping off drastically because it builds up like a biofilm on the little blade.
Okay. All right.
And
RobB'zReef was asking the gyre, are they on opposite schedule or random, or how do you have that flow? I mean, because with the growth you have on that SPS, that flow is huge in your tank, as far as the importance of it.
So the original gyres that I bought had the little black module that came with it that wasn't Wi-Fi controllable, and it kind of sucked trying to program them because they'd be off and they wouldn't be together. So when Hydros came out with the Wave engine, before they came out with their full controller, I bought one of those to put them on. And now what I do is, for instance, this one is running on constant at 70%, and this one is running on the SPS random at 70%, the Hydros SPS random mode. And so what will happen is that will run from 6 to noon like that. And then they will switch, they will invert. And so this one will be constant and this one will be random. So you'll see the turbulent line move like just back and forth on this side. And then 6 hours later, it'll move back and forth on that side. Kind of just.
No, I don't have gyres, but that's actually, I don't know why I didn't think of that before for introducing a little more chaotic flow. I've got 2 opposing MP60s, but I should really put them like that, like just put them on different schedules or different wave actions, and then flop them based off a time frame. That's actually a really good idea. Never thought of that.
I would love to take credit for that idea, but I got it off of the Ecotech. They have the Coral Lab stuff that you can read through. It's like pages of PDF that they did with Worldwide Corals, and that's how recommended. That's how Worldwide Corals, Vic at Worldwide Corals recommended running the MP40, or I guess whoever did the Coral Lab study stuff. That's how they ran their MP40s. Was one was on constant, one was on what's their random one called? Reef Crest.
Yeah, Reef Crest.
Reef. One of them was on Reef Crest, and one of them was matching in constant. And so the Reef Crest would move, and so you'd see and then they'd switch every 6 hours, and then it'd be turbulent on this side and constant.
Yeah, I mean that's why we talk, right? Because none of us are omniscient. If I was a three-eyed raven.
Right.
A term from a certain show. I would know everything and just do it, right? But I mean, so I'm not. So I love these conversations, and I'm like, oh, this is such a simple idea. Why didn't I think of it? So it doesn't matter if it's original or not. I mean, I want to try.
Yeah.
This is great.
But I've been running that for probably over a year now, and so far I like it. And for a while I ran two MP40s on the back wall for like low speed, just random at the reef crest. And I feel like my torches and a couple of acros didn't really care for that. I think they were too close and they were getting blasted because the front to the back of a 90 gallon's not that far. And
Right.
so
No,
MP40 on the back wall was getting smoked.
Right. I think I have right now along my back wall for flow, I have a stream, a Toonsy Stream 3, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was free, so that's why I'm using it. But I don't know. I've been thinking about
Right.
gyre for more of a sheet of water going back there. But so the
last
thing we've got here is your wife has a tank. I'm to understand.
Yep. She decided she wanted an anemone for the clownfish to live in, and I said I was not putting one in my tank, so we can get you your own.
She didn't want you having all the glory, and I kind of agree with you. I my girlfriend's like, oh,
And
an anemone. We have one, and it causes enough problems. I'm like, no more anemones. I'm like,
yeah, I was anti-anemone. I got too many SPS for this thing to walk across.
yeah.
So my clownfish live in a Duncan, and they know no different. So they've been living in that thing for 7 years, so they'll be fine continuing to live in it.
Can't wait till my Duncan gets a little bigger to host those guys. But well, yeah, walk us through a little bit about what she's got going on in here.
So hers is a 20-gallon water box cube. Okay. That one, I'm a big, if it's hard to do, you're probably not going to do it. If it's a lot of work, you're less likely to actually do it. If you make it easy to access, easy to clean, So this one has nothing on it. I mean, it's got an ATO. It's got
what kind of light?
One wave maker. It's got a XR15 that came off my old 10-gallon. I already had it laying around, so threw it on the new one.
You're probably not running that thing super high, right? I mean,
I think 50%, maybe. Yeah. I did a par test to make sure that those bubble tips were getting right at 200, and everything else was getting 75 to 150, and left it alone.
Looks like rock flower anemones down there at the bottom, along with the zoas.
Yep, I picked up 3 of those. The 3 you can see well at Reefapalooza. She got all the coral at Reefapalooza. I got one little bubblegum digi.
You just got to go.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to go. I didn't have any room for anything anyways, so I didn't have anywhere anything could go. I actually, to put that bubblegum digi, I ripped out, you can still see pieces of it, a huge plating money that I gave to a local guy.
Nice. Because
it was trying to take over.
Sammy D was asking, what's the orange SPS to the right? About 8 inches.
8 inches to the right. Oh, you're right. So I'm assuming this one here, hold on. You had it right there. Go back.
Right there?
Yeah, let it play. I think it pans. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was the previous one. I saw it in one of them. Oh, yeah, it's above the torch.
Okay.
That one, I assume, right in the middle of the screen above the torch? Is that? If so, that is a ASD Rainbow Millie.
Where have you gotten, like, I know you're probably not collecting a lot now because it looks like you're pretty full up and you're just, growing it out and maintaining it. But where have you found a lot of your pieces? Do you have a favorite coral vendor? I mean, obviously we got to get our corals from somewhere. So, I mean, who's been good to you?
My favorite, if you're buying acros, my favorite guy online has been Battle Corals. Has.
He's a Wisconsin boy,
I
understand.
Top quality, fantastic. The 1, 2, 3, 4 of the corals in this view came from him. I mean, I've had nothing but positive experience with him. But a lot of these came from local guys, like this big, huge confetti up front. about to get stung by the torch that I need to frag so that it doesn't kill everything. It came from a local guy who used to have his own farm. He sold acros online as well, so I got a lot from him. That Walt Disney up above it, the yellow one to the, it came from him. I've gotten a few from
torches
TSA.
are mean. I had one.
Yeah.
I was moving some stuff around. I was doing maintenance, and I moved an A-can that I had on a piece of ceramic. I just moved it up on the rocks to get out of my way so I could vacuum the sand or just stir it up or something. And I didn't realize it, but I had a New York Knicks that was really extended that day, and it just brushed up against that A-can a couple times, and it just melted it. Like the next day, that thing was just smoked. I mean, it doesn't take long at all.
That confetti in that frame right there is the only thing reasonably close to it that's not getting tissue peeled away by that torch. Like my ASD Millie up above it that he asked about, it's the underside of it's nothing but a skeleton. And the blue and green coral to the left of it is also, the base is getting stripped away by the tentacles. So I've got to see there, you can see a piece of that I missed off that plating Monty.
Okay.
But
yep.
That whole section of my tank, glass to that rock, was just one giant Monty. And so there's a local guy that's got like a 200-gallon tank, and he needed some coral to put in it. And I was like, here, take this, please. So I broke the whole thing out of there and just gave it to him.
Right. So you've clearly had some great successes. Those are evident right before us. So anything like failure-wise you want to talk about, along your journey when you're moving along, like just some things that like either like, oh shit, I wish I had known better, or that was stupid, or we've all had that stuff, ugly periods. Did you go through those?
This tank, I learned a lot of my failures with my previous tank because, like I said, I started with a few soft corals that a friend gave me. She had a classroom tank, and so actually that green A-can right there on the bottom left is one that she gave me years ago. I mean, I've probably had that thing 6 years. And that Duncan that the clowns live in, same. She gave me that. And there's a Blasto in there that you can't see that also came from her tank. But that 10-gallon tank was a huge learning experience because I went through an awful ugly phase. I knew nothing about saltwater. I learned a lot from the BRS 52 weeks of reefing. Like I learned a lot more than, I was trying to wing it up until that series started coming out, and I was just failing miserably. I'd buy corals off the Worldwide Corals eBay auctions, and a month later, 50% of them were dead, and I was just struggling. And
yeah, sometimes I wish I'd cut my teeth on a much smaller tank as well. I mean, this tank I have now isn't my first reef tank, but it's been my first in a while, and I'm like, maybe I should get my feet back wet, like on a 32 BioCube or a 40 or something. But no, go right to the big one and then learn the hard way.
My problem was that I came from like the high-tech planted tank world, so you can't overfeed your fish because you're just feeding the plants. And so I had to learn more about nutrient control with that little 10-gallon tank because a handful of pellets is gonna spike you incredibly, and so that tube on the back wall, that is the Avast plank tube that comes with the plank. It's got a little pump, a little C-shape pump in it that mixes the food in the water and then spits it out the bottom.
Would you recommend that one? I've been actually thinking about getting a dry feeder. Most of my fish will eat flake, but I think about 20% of my fish won't. But I think it's still worth it based on that.
So if you feed something small, like I feed their reef jerky, which is like freeze dried. It's really good for freeze dried foods. So
okay,
freeze dried foods are, I put flake in there too. But it has an auger, and you have to have some sort of timer that it's on because it's either on or it's off. There's no built-in timer in the thing, but that auger just slowly drops stuff out. and then it'll float in the top of that cup as it's getting mixed and hydrated. And then when it gets or it loses buoyancy, it sinks out of the cup bottom.
Okay.
And so I do like that for flake and freeze dried, because it will not just float in the cup until the fish can get it, you know, like the small fish get everything, the big fish can't get to it. But I do the Avast has a reef jerky, and if you'll ever look at the like nutrient facts on freeze dried food, they're really like protein and all that. They're super high. Freeze dried foods are even more so than like frozen cubes and stuff like that. Like I don't know what the freeze drying process does, but it apparently traps a lot of that nutrient rich material in the food. And so I've started doing the Avast reef jerky, because it's like a mix of like freeze dried brine, freeze dried mysis, calanus, and a few other like planktonic. So it's like a powder mixed with some freeze dried mysis shrimp, you know, and so it's great for the small fish and coral. But that thing does fantastic with it. I mean, it does great.
Give that a try, because nothing in my tank is super excited about pellets at all.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
so I put some veggie pellets in there. I put the reef jerky, and then I put the Ocean Nutrition flakes in there, and then there's a stir bar in there with like little. The old version had zip ties on it, little stiff, short zip ties that kept the food stirred up, and then there's an auger under there that spins it out, and so it mixes it up really well for you while it's on, and then it mixes a blend to the tank. And so I've had nothing but, up until it broke recently, it worked fine, perfectly fine. So, and he's already fixed it and sent it back, so it should be here on Monday or Tuesday.
All right. Yeah, nice. I'm definitely gonna have to look into that. I got a Euro brace on my tank, so I think, don't they make some kind of extension for that, or
the mount?
I got like a 4-inch Euro brace.
I think the mount itself, I think you can convert it to make it sit on a Euro brace. I think you can flip it and make it sit. You know what I'm saying? Like it's on, so the little mount that hooks to the tank is on a rail. So it's a sliding rail with screws, so you can tighten it. So you could pull it to the front, flip it backwards, and then hook it to the Euro brace. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I have mine slid. So I think it would, out of the box, work on a Euro brace. I may be wrong. There may be an adapter, but he sent a lot of parts that I didn't use too. So, because I didn't need it for my tank.
Very good. So, anything else that you have, like for, like, do you have a reefing soapbox? Things that, might irritate you in the hobby, or, don't have to necessarily make sense to anybody else, but it's like, your hot button.
I don't know. Probably like, I feel like, and this is coming from a person who loves buying gear, man. I had an ozone reactor on this thing for a year or two, just for clearer water that I don't really have an issue with clarity, but it did make it clearer, but there's just more stuff in there. I feel like people go super heavy with equipment, like, and I love new electronic stuff, and I'm always like, oh man, I want the new, but I feel like it's overdone. Like you can look at that anemone tank, and that thing gets 2 water changes a month. There's a heater on an Inkbird. There's an ATO, and there's a wave pump, and that's it. Like that tank runs with nothing. I mean, the bare minimum. There's a Nero 3 in there for a wave maker, and then it's just got the little return pump in the cube. There's no skimmer. There's a little clownfish and a little tail spot blenny and one of those exquisite firefishes. And I mean, it just, the nitrates never get over.
Water change
once to twice a month, depending on when I remember. Usually when I see the glass is starting to get a little scuzzy, I'm like, that thing probably needs a water change. I don't really test the parameters on it that often, maybe once a month, and it usually stays under 20 nitrates and 0.1 phosphate. And it's just, it can be done. That one gets hand fed. It's not getting heavy in, heavy out, but it doesn't need it. I mean, there's like 3 fish in it that don't require. I mean, they're all easy to keep fish.
Our
And I
previous
feel
reefer, I think Lindsay had a 31 gallon or 30 something gallon BioCube, and it had the most minimalistic setup ever, and it looked great. There was no issues with it whatsoever.
and so in that, I feel like my peeve is that people coming into the hobby get told by people who've been in the hobby that you've got to have this, you've got to have this, you've got to have this, you got to have this, or you're going to fail. It's not true. My biggest thing is prepare for what you don't want to do up front. So if you don't want to do a boatload of water changes, you probably do need to look into heavy in, heavy, or you need to look at heavy out, type of filtration, like a bigger protein skimmer, but you don't have to have a protein skimmer. You just have to alter the way you do things. Like that tank, we just feed very lightly, just sprinkle just a little bit of food in there, just enough for the fish to eat. Their stomachs aren't that big. They don't need that much, especially you're not very active ones that aren't like amphibious or something like that. And I don't know, people get worked up on all this equipment that they have to start a reef tank, and you really don't. I mean, you can do it on nothing.
Right. Yeah. If your goal is just, hey, I want to keep some beautiful corals and fish or whatever, and that's the focus, then you're right. You don't need all this gear to be successful. If maybe you're a nerd, like me, I like tinkering. then
that's me.
The gear, right? Because that's part of it. For me, it's like half an.
I'm a tinkerer, and I like messing with stuff, and I'm a techie type person, so I like electronic techie type stuff, and I know that eventually I will get lazy, and that if it's something that I'm gonna have to do a lot of maintenance on, or the maintenance is terrible. If the maintenance is hard, so like canister filters, you can run a canister filter on a reef tank. People say you can't do it. It's nitrate factory. It is doable. You got to clean them. And I hate cleaning canister filters. I will never own a canister filter because they are miserable to clean. I would if somebody said, can I put a hang on the back filter on the back of a reef tank and run it successfully? I'd tell them yes. You just got to stay on the maintenance. But a hang on the back filter, you just pull the little stuff out, rinse it off, stick it back in there. You don't have to turn it off half the time.
Yeah, I think that the equipment you get should be a natural progression on its own, right? So when you're ready to do the next thing, or if something changes and you're like, I don't got time for that maintenance anymore, or hey, I suck at keeping up with this hand dosing. Okay, I'm going to get a doser, right? Let it happen on its own accord. Don't feel like you have to start all of that stuff up front. And I think yours was the same way, where it's just it kind of grew over time and made changes as your tank evolved.
I bought a few little gear here and there and bought it a piece at a time.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
I started with calc, ran calc only. Then I decided I was going to get a calc stir to save space, and then I ran that for a while, and then I ran out of sealing and had to switch.
So do you have anything near-term plans, any big plans for your tank? Are you kind of just like, tending your bonsai forest and sharing your frags? I assume you share some frags with local reefers as that stuff grows out?
Oh, yeah. I feel like at some point they're going to be like, I don't want anything. I've got everything you've got.
Yeah, right. Is there a next step for Swinneys Reef?
Not particularly for this one. This one is just let's let it grow and see what happens over the course. But I would like a bigger one in the future.
As things start growing up, and see what you can. It seems like you got enough to seed another tank for sure, and then maybe new stuff
for sure. I wish I'd have been a little better about spacing the corals. I didn't do a very good job with that when I started this one. Everything was shiny and everything went in the tank.
Yeah, bubble gum everywhere, right? Close as you can.
Right.
So it looks like you got something going on. Yeah. It's painful for me, but I'm leaving stuff spaced out so it grows out. But it's like I hate every time you walk up there, like, there's room to go for a coral there. And you're like, well, wait a year, and then no, there won't be.
I told my wife that we were so when we move, we're planning on moving eventually. When we move, I would like to get like a 200-ish gallon, know, and on that one, I would love to maybe 10 acros maybe like a digitata Monty, and that's it. Maybe some, some stuff on the sand, like a couple of Ghanis and a few like micro Musa, but just let those things get as big as they can get try to get some ocean sized colonies in this thing, and not touch the neighbor when they get to 4 inches wide.
Anthony was asking what overflow is that. Anthony, was that on his larger tank or the cube?
Oh, that's the eShops overflow. The new one, the one that's even slimmer, the Eclipse maybe is what it's called. I had the original eShops overflow like that, but I went to change sumps and accidentally cracked the overflow box trying to make the previous plumbing fit the new sump. And
how big is your sump? I noticed that thing didn't appear to be all that large.
It's the Triton 29 inch long, I think 29 or 24, whatever. It's like, if you filled it all the way to the top, it'd probably be like 30 gallons.
Yeah,
but it's about halfway.
Big enough to fit that 150 Regal. Your
barely.
Yeah,
barely.
I noticed that was pretty tight. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I run a UV sterilizer, so that pumps in there. I have the big Pentair one.
When it comes time to upgrade, I'm gonna have to drive down to Missouri with a fistful of cash because it looks like you got some pretty cool stuff.
Right. Hey, I've got plenty to go around. Actually, that one that you're looking at in the very back there's not even mine. I'm holding it for a local guy. There's a Millie back there in the back. I had to make a PV stand. It's not even on the rock work. It's just sitting on a piece of PVC with a little 4-way thing on the bottom so that it can be up and getting flow.
You guys do
it was dying in
coral banking, local coral banking, or hey, my tank's going down for a little while type of thing?
That was it, man. That one was taking a tank, and I've had it for probably a year now, and it's been fine. I brought it back. It didn't die. So
good deal.
And then I've got another thing of zoanthids that he recently loaned to me. He bought a decent sized frag of GMK zoas, and because of their price, he was scared to put all of them in his tank. So he gave me a frag of
stuff. It's pretty expensive.
He gave me a frag of probably 8 polyps, and there's probably 40 on it now. So
oh wow,
you can see them. You can see them under that torch. They're closed off because I made them angry before doing this video because you wanted a video, so I immediately cleaned the glass and then shot the video. So those are real close to the glass, so they're kind of at the bottom left corner of the screen. When he handed me that, that's a 4-inch frag disc, and they're almost
size.
Yeah, I've had them probably 7 months, and they have really taken over.
Utter chaos, I think, is the Zoa I've been looking for a long time, just because I like that Zoa, but I haven't found any yet. So,
right, but I mean, I wasn't gonna buy them. I'm not spending that kind of money on a zoanthid. I don't really have a whole lot of zoanthids in my tank, so. But
yeah,
he told me,
garden, but I'm not spending a lot of money for it.
So. He told me if I kept it alive, I could have some. So sure, I'll take that bet.
That's fair enough.
Right.
So awesome. Well, I really appreciate you having come on. Lindsay was going to join us this month, but she had a conflict in schedule, so she said that she would like to come back in September, October. Justin, you're certainly welcome to come back and hang out anytime you want in the future. I can just put more frames up here on the screen, and we can all shoot shit and have a good time. So we'll see what we're looking for reefers here. If you're interested in September, October, or any month out there, please feel free to reach out. If you feel we got a shot at making this cool, like and subscribe to my channel. We'd love to have your participation. If you don't want to show your reef tank, but you just want to come on in here and talk some shit, you're welcome to do that too. Just reach out. There's a link in the description for a canvas to fill out kind of a little bit about yourself, or just you can contact me via my email or reach out to me, RobB'zReef, on Instagram. Thanks for everybody coming, and most of all, thanks Justin for being patient, getting me the videos, and had fun, and we'll keep in touch.
Man, yeah. All right, thanks.
Swinneys Reef on Instagram for anybody who's got questions to Justin. He's a wealth of knowledge, and if you're looking to keep SPS, he might know a thing or two. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, man.
All right, bye.